Peter Foster's book, What Went Wrong with Brexit, is an interesting analysis of populism, ideology, and stupidity, fanaticism, opportunists, simplistic analysis, and sloganizing, where rhetoric overtakes reality and lies become the substance of political discourse. Not only the lies of Boris Johnson, but the lies on the side of the bus about what you're going to do with the money that you get from Brexit and so on. All of this is trading on deceit, trading on words. And when words lose their meaning, then I'm afraid reality evaporates. And whether we've had economic stagnation for the last 10 years or for the last 14 years or not, there are people who insist that that's exactly what we've had. What we have definitely had is an obsession, an introspective obsession, a navel-gazing obsession with the reality of meaning, and a defiance to anybody who questions our veracity. A defiance, for example, of the European Court of Justice, of the ECHR, of anybody who questions, finger wags in our general direction. The single market, the EU, the thing we joined in the 1970s, was an attempt to simplify and an attempt to ease trade. Brexit has been an attempt to confuse trade, masking under the same banner of easing restrictions, of easing trade. So whereas the former, joining the EU, was genuine and involved truth, the latter, of leaving the EU, used pretty well the same arguments, but they were fallacious. They were false. We have seen businesses paying out simply to stand still, their capital, their knowledge, their relationships, their hopes, and starting again, effectively, starting again from an entirely new position. What is the point of that? Yes, we can survive Brexit. Yes, we can keep going, but only by starting again. And why would we want to, why did we impose this start a gun scenario? There's a kickstart fantasy that tearing up the exam paper and throwing it behind you, crumpling paper, is somehow going to give you an advantage after you've been writing for 20 minutes. It doesn't give you an advantage. It is stupid and pointless. Somewhere in that piece of paper there's something that you've written which is of value. The paper tossers need their heads bashing together because they are stupid. And I'm afraid paper tossing, or some sort of tossing, was the only explanation, or is the only explanation that can be given for Brexit. It is a self-indulgent and ultimately self-destructive action. There may be some good in it, but the only way we're going to survive it is by starting again. And I think this fragmentation is to be found in all levels of society, right down to education, work experience, creativity. Even our legal systems have been fractured by deceit. By deceit. Because when you look at the horizon problem, that's not the academic horizon thing, that's the post office horizon thing. When you look at the horizon problem, what you see is a series of institutions that are not working properly. The post office, certainly. The government, certainly. But also the legal system, certainly. all of them working badly, and all of them, and of course Fujitsu, the business, all of these institutions predicating their actions on deceit, embracing the world of deceit. And the idea, the overarching idea that we can sneer at somebody else's regulations, somebody else's advice, the Northern Ireland Protocol, breaking international law, getting rid of thousands of pieces of legislation, the Jacob Rees-Mogg approach, the burning, the bonfire of EU regulation. This is absurdity. Nothing good comes from destruction. And the referendum, Brexit, was about destruction, not about building. If it was about building, then tell me what we built. We built nothing. Nobody knew what we were building after Brexit. I asked this question many, many times. I asked this question of UKIP. What happens after Brexit? What is the vision after Brexit? Nobody knew. Brexit, the destruction, the bonfire, was all people knew. That bonfire, incidentally, was even more to the front at the time when Liz Truss took power. Burn! Burn! It was like watching the Wicked Witch of the West, framed against the sunset, screaming at the flying monkeys. Fly! Fly! Except in her case, she was screaming at in passion at Kwasi Kwarteng's prodigious package. Look at it! Look at it! Ah! With the extraordinary hand gestures, which she was practicing. And I think Rishi Sunak, for all people may not like him, is a sound pair of hands. I think he's simply been offered, and I don't entirely like the more extreme bits of his thinking, but I think he's a sound pair of hands. But he was starting from a position where the entire machinery of Number 10 had pretty well been burnt overnight in a bonfire of insane delight. So throwing the petrol of ideology at the flames as they licked ever higher. There's another one! Says Liz Truss, like some maniacal version of Thunderbirds. And Keir Starmer is another person who I think is sound and solid, if slightly boring. But none of that gives me any confidence. If a sound pair of hands can't repair the damage, and that damage is enormous. You can see some of the damage by looking at a graph of the polling over the last year and a half or so, and you suddenly see this spike when Liz Truss becomes Prime Minister. This spike with the Conservative Party going down and the Labour Party going up. And it never changes really from that point. I think there was a blip because of Boris's duplicity, but it was a blip that could have been corrected. Liz Truss was the deciding factor in the coming election, in the same way as I think Theresa May was the deciding factor in the destruction of Brexit. Whatever anybody may have hoped for Brexit, Theresa May destroyed it. And it doesn't matter whether Boris was saying, get Brexit done. It doesn't matter. He was too late. Too late. Theresa May had already done the damage. And you can think, well, I'm being harsh on Theresa May. No, I'm not. I saw the damage she was already doing when she was in charge of the Home Office. Much of the problems that the Home Office has demonstrated over the last few years under Priti Patel and Suella Braverman was simply a realization of the hostile environment that was set up by Theresa May. Now, Theresa May was building on stuff that had been left behind by the Labour Party. So it's not entirely hers, but she was the main instrument of destruction. And I found from my own experience that she wasn't prepared to listen. I went to her about student visas, and she was defiant and utterly failed to hear what was being said. She wasn't the only one. Andrea Leadsom was another, and I think these two people were so focused on the fantasy that they were the new Thatcher, and that Thatcher was somebody who was inflexible and was powerful. Thatcher was blessed by having a media that had been gifted the image of the Iron Lady, the image of inflexibility, and she played on it. But what little I know of Thatcher personally, what I saw was that she was somebody who listened, who engaged in a debate, but who listened, and she listened attentively, and then pounced. But certainly my experience of Theresa May is that she didn't listen at all, and I think she set a standard. And I think any politician, any constituency MP, their first job is to listen to the constituents. And ministers, their first job is to listen to the people who are sent to them. and I think ministers and MPs have misjudged the distinction between their job to get things done, their job to implement things, to listen, and their effort to get into that position to electioneer and defend their position. Once they're there, their job is to do, not and to listen, not to defend their position and to make promises. Their job is to fulfill the promises that they made.